I'm Jolene Wynn, and this is the Porn Addict's Wife podcast, episode number 137, Making Room.
Your life does not have to revolve around your husband's pornography addiction. You are not defined by his choices or by what he sees on a screen. You are not just the porn addict's wife. You are so much more. In this podcast, I'm going to teach you how to go from handling it to healed, because I've been where you are and you don't have to stay there. My name is Jolene Wynn. I'm a member of the LDS faith, a certified life coach, and a wife of a former porn addict. And this is a podcast for the porn addict's wife.
Hello, my ladies. Merry Christmas. I am recording this on Christmas Day for y'all, and I hope you guys had a wonderful weekend. I hope for those of you that celebrate Christmas that this was just a beautiful weekend for you with Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. It was so nice for our family. It was a little bittersweet. We found out the day before Christmas Eve that the people who were going to buy our house backed out and just decided not to move. And so they backed out. So my house is now back on the market. So if you guys know anybody that wants to buy my house, please let me know. So that was a little bittersweet. Also, my whole family is extremely sick, and I am extremely sick, as you guys can tell. But it was also amazing because all of last week, for those of you that signed up for Coach Week, I got to spend an entire week with y'all, and it was amazing. And one of the things that came up on the calls over and over and over was emotional baggage, was just this feeling of carrying around pain and hurt and devastation and despair and anger and bitterness and distrust and all of these negative emotions that we don't know how to let go of. That was really the thing that just came up so often. In each one of these calls, everybody had different circumstances, and yet the theme was all the same. And this makes sense, ladies, because no one has ever taught you how to let go of emotional baggage. No one has ever taught you how to actually process all of that pain that you feel from everything that your husband has done, right? No one has ever taught you how to do that, and that is not your fault. It's okay. No one's ever taught you. That is exactly what I do with my clients. And so as I was talking to them about it, that was just the thing that kept coming up was, how do I get rid of all of this negative emotion? And it also makes sense that it comes up, especially at this time of year, because around the holidays, things get a little bit more chaotic. Everything is not exactly the norm. Our schedules are off. We're traveling, so there's more stress. Everything might be a little bit more overwhelming. And so our capacity to handle more emotions is very limited, right? We feel like we're already handling so much that's when all of our stuff comes back up and we feel like we are at our wits' end. And that is kind of the theme of what came up. So I wanted to talk a little bit about it today because as Christmas has been around, one of the things that I kept kind of hearing over the last couple of days that inspired this topic for this podcast is, what are you making room for? This is a fascinating question for me because over the last month and a half, as you guys know, my husband and I have been going through a lot, and I have been experiencing a lot of emotion, specifically a lot of negative emotion, and I feel like I have no more room for anything else. And it has been a struggle to purposefully allow myself to feel positive emotion, and specifically toward him. And this was something that came up on Saturday. He and I were talking, and we had a big long discussion Friday night, and so Saturday morning is Christmas Eve, and I just sat there and I thought, okay, I just learned some things. We made some breakthroughs that brought up a lot of negative emotion for me, things that were not exactly fun to hear, shall we say. And so it brought up a lot of negative emotion, and I sat there and I thought, you know what? I could allow myself on Christmas Eve to just sit in this negative emotion. I totally could, and it would be completely justified, and that would be okay. And I thought, why do I want to do that? And part of what came up is that it felt good. Now, ladies, when you ask yourself this, it might seem counterintuitive, right? Our logical brain says, well, why on earth would we want to feel negative emotion? Negative emotion doesn't feel good. But ladies, yes, it does. It validates our story. If you guys go listen very early on in the podcast, within the first 20 episodes, I have an episode called Your Feelings Are Valid. Go listen to that one, because that is exactly what our brain wants to do. Our brain wants to keep the negative emotion that we feel because it feels good to tell our story that way, because then we're the victim. We didn't do anything wrong. He hurt our feelings. It's all his fault, which is something that actually sounds very true. But even if it is, ladies, I want to encourage you to question, why do you want to keep it? Okay. And what would happen if you were willing to let it go? Now, this was a question I actually asked during Coach Week on our calls, and everybody is going to have a different answer to that. So I would encourage you to be really self-reflective and be honest with yourself about the answer. Ask yourself, okay, what if I were willing to let it go? And when I asked myself this question on Christmas Eve, one of the things that came up was that my brain wanted to keep it because it felt good, right? Because it wanted to keep the story. But keeping the story of how he hurt me and how much this sucks and how terrible this is and how I don't like this and all of that, all it does is keep that hurt inside me longer. And that's what I was making room for internally, was those emotions. Okay. Now, if you think about Christmas, one of the biggest questions we always get, or I at least that I have found this Christmas season in particular, was just kind of this idea of, right, of Mary and Joseph, and they're trying to find room, and there's no room for them in the inn. Now, this is something I have heard so many times in lessons, in church, and just in other areas of life, is like, are you making room for Christ, right? Like, do you let him into your heart? Do you let him into your soul? Are you making room for him, or are you kind of shutting him out and saying there's no room? Now, I've always thought of that in a spiritual aspect, but this weekend, as I was feeling this negative emotion and asking myself, okay, why do I want to keep this? One of the questions that I asked myself with that, just like I said, was, or one of the things I realized was that I was making room for all of this negative emotion inside me. And my realization was, if I'm making room for all this negative emotion, then there isn't room for anything else. So then on Christmas Eve, I will just get to feel all the negative emotion, and I won't get to feel all the positive ones as well. So I kept kind of hearing this thought this last couple of days. What are you making room for? Right? So for Mary and Joseph, there was no room for them. So there's no room for Jesus. And I keep thinking about how it's not that there wasn't room at the inn, right? It's that the rooms were already full. Do you guys see the difference? It's not like there wasn't a table with chairs around it. It's that all the chairs were occupied already. It's that all the rooms were already full. It's not that there wasn't an inn. It's that the inn had already been filled, okay? And sometimes I really think we do this with our emotions. So again, I've thought about this a lot of times as regarding like my spirituality and am I letting Christ into my life? But I had never thought of it in terms of emotion until this weekend. But sometimes that's exactly what happens. We get so full that there isn't room for the best things, okay? We get so full of negative emotion. We get so full of anger and hurt and bitterness and resentment and pain and worthlessness and betrayal. And we get so full of those emotions that we're unable to allow anything else because we're already filled to the brim with all of that negative emotion, right? Ladies, do you feel this way sometimes? Do you feel like you are just at your max, like you are completely full of negative emotion and you have no spare room left? This is what happens when we carry around emotional baggage. All the negative emotion that we have that we haven't dealt with, that stays with us, and it tends to take up so much of our emotional capacity, right? I've talked about this before. We only have so much emotional capacity. We can only take and hold so much emotion. And when we are using our emotional capacity to just carry around all the pain and bitterness and anger and resentment from all of the years past, then our emotional capacity is already pretty much to the brim. right? And so then add anything else, and we feel like we are so overwhelmed, like we can't do anything else, and we don't know where to start with how to change it, right? Because again, no one's ever taught us this. And all of that emotion that we feel, all that emotional baggage that you carry around, it takes up space inside of us. And then, even if you want to feel positive, you can't, because there's no room inside you for anything else. Now, most of the time, we're not doing this on purpose, right? Most of the time, this is subconscious, right? We're holding on to negative emotion. We're carrying around this emotional baggage from past experiences simply because we don't know how to let it go. We might not even be aware that we're doing it, right? We might not even be aware that there's trauma and pain from previous experiences. But I'm pretty sure if you're listening to this podcast, you at least have some idea that there's probably some emotional pain from the past that you're carting around a little bit, right? So there's some of it there, and you guys are a little bit aware that it's there, but there might even be more that you're not even aware of yet. There might be, think of those things that just pop up occasionally, right? Even they might not be things that you think of every single day, but they might be instances that keep coming back up, that you just can't seem to fully let go, that come up maybe once a month or every other month, or even just once every few months. You'll have that memory, right, of that time when you learned this thing, right? And your brain just can't seem to totally get past it. And even if it's not running your everyday, it's still there, right? That's what I'm talking about. There's all of this emotional baggage. There's all of this emotional pain that we're just kind of carrying around and keeping with us. And it takes up all of our space, and there's no room for anything else. So even when there are positive experiences that come knocking on the door, we don't even have any space to let them in. Do you guys feel that way sometimes? Like you want to be present with your kids. You want to have all of these positive thoughts toward and feelings toward your husband, especially if he's starting to change his behavior, and yet you can't seem to let it go. You don't have anything left to give. This is when it's a very tempting to slip into apathy. When it's very tempting to slip into, well, I don't even care. I just can't anymore, right? This is often when we want to give up. Okay? But the problem with that, or the reason that we want to do that, is not because we actually don't care or because we actually want to give up. It's just that we don't have anything left because we're so full of this negative emotion that we've been carrying around. Now, so again, like I said, sometimes this happens subconsciously and sometimes it's not. Sometimes we are almost holding on to this consciously, kind of like what I was recognizing on Christmas Eve, right? I was recognizing that there was some emotion that I kind of wanted to feel. I wanted to feel the hurt. I wanted that to stay with me. And again, it's important to ask yourself, why? Why do I want to keep this hurt with me? What if I were willing to let it go? What would I do? What would my life look like if I could? What would my relationship with myself look like? What would I have more space for? What would my relationship with my husband look like? How would I be able to interact with my kids if I weren't so full of this emotion? Sometimes we want to consciously, even a little bit, even part of us wants to consciously keep all that negative emotion with us, wants to stay full because it's scary not to. Right? As hard as it is to stay full of negative emotion, it is scarier to open yourself up to the possibility of getting hurt again. It's more frightening in our brains to forgive and move on and let go of that negative emotion than it is to keep it. Because when we keep it, it's comfortable. It's familiar. Even if it's not great, even if it's not positive, it's familiar. It's what we know. We've been doing it for a really long time. We're really good at it. And our brain is a little bit afraid of letting it go because of whatever your brain makes it mean. What does it mean if I let it go? These are all questions you can ask yourself. Think of that pain that you're holding on to. Why are you so afraid to let it go? What would that mean? If you were willing to let it go, what would it mean? So often, so many of us think it would mean that we don't care, or that he's allowed to go do whatever he wants and we just have to roll over and just take it, right? Our brain has all of these things that it means, but part of it really is just a fear of opening up and being vulnerable once again, and opening up to have room for other things. But ladies, if you are closed off to more emotion, you are closing yourself off to positive emotion as well. You can't only close yourself off to more negative emotion. When you decide to close yourself off and you say, I don't have any more room in me, I can't take in anything else, you're not only rejecting more negative emotion, you're also rejecting more positive, right? You can't selectively, you know how husbands have selective deafness and they sometimes don't hear you, and then sometimes they can hear you from 3 floors away, just depending on what they want to hear and don't want to hear. That's not what emotions are like. Okay. You can't just say, I don't want to feel these ones and I do want to feel those ones. When you close yourself off, you close yourself off to all of them. You close yourself off to the joy and to the beauty, to love, to closeness, to attachment, to attraction, to desire. You close yourself off to all of these amazing emotions that are possible because our brain is too scared and doesn't understand that there is beauty in being vulnerable. There is beauty in connection, and connection only comes with vulnerability. And vulnerability is actually just being open. We would rather stay closed. We would rather say, our brain would rather say, there's no more room. I don't have room for anything else. And if you have a lot of emotional baggage, then that's exactly what it feels like, because your emotional baggage is taking up all of the space within you. Right? Does this make sense? So if you guys are feeling like you're at your max, if you're feeling like there is no more room, then I want to encourage you to ask yourself, what am I making room for now? And I really want to encourage you to be reflective on this. This is a great time of year to be reflective on what it is that where you are and where you're going, where you want to go, what you want to change, how you want to adjust your life. This is the time of fresh starts. There is no better time than right now to look at yourself and say, okay, where am I? And is this where I want to be? And where am I going? And is that where I want to go? And if not, where do I want to go? If anything were possible, where would I want to go? What would I want to make room for? Because right now, ladies, that negative emotion that you're feeling, it doesn't have to stay that way. It doesn't have to be there. This is not how you have to feel the rest of your life. Did you know this? This is the best news I could ever give you. I promise. Okay? The negative emotion that you feel, the emotional baggage that you carry around, it can be gone. I can teach you how to do it. 100%. That's exactly what I do. The emotional baggage that you've been carrying around, there's a reason your brain doesn't want to let it go. What is it? Let's look at it. Let's take a moment to reflect on it. And what if it were possible to let it go? What would that even look like? Open yourself up, ladies, to the possibility of making room emotionally for something other than emotional pain. Take a moment to allow yourself the possibility that there's more positivity, that there is something else out there for you, that there is something better for you to feel, but you have to be the one to make room for it. So let's take a look. What is it that you're making room for? Is that what you want to make room for? And if not, what do you want to make room for, and how are you going to make that happen? Those are my questions for y'all today. I hope you guys had a beautiful Merry Christmas. I hope you guys are looking forward to the new year. If any of these questions are something that brought up something for you and you want help on it, I want to invite you to come coach with me. I would love to help you work through this, get rid of all that emotional baggage, and start fresh. A brand new year, a brand new you, making room for the things you want to have, not just the things that are still there. All right, ladies, I love you so much. I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll talk to you next week, so take care.
All right, ladies, if you are loving what you are learning on the podcast, I want to invite you to come join my coaching program. This is where we take it to the next level, and we actually start applying and learning the how of moving forward. This podcast has taught you the what, and the coaching program is where you're going to learn the how. This is where you learn how to actually start moving forward, process all of that pain that you feel, and let it go once and for all. If you are ready to finally move forward and stop living a life that revolves around your husband's pornography addiction, then I want to invite you to come join me today. Just head to my website, joleneWynn.com, and sign up today. I can't wait to see you there.